Okay, so we are 10 seconds in. We're about to get started, and this week we are doing watercolors again. And we're doing a somewhat more complicated picture than we were last time. Now, it's not going to show really well in this view, but if I do this, you can see it's a bit more complex, got a lot of smaller bits. So we're going to get started with that. There we go. Okay, so this is this was from a drawing prompt I found online that was basically a spaceship or interstellar junkyard. So we're going to have lots of like grays, blues, things like that. And trying not to get too much water on the brush to start. But and again, we're going to have the ink kind of bleeding some because that's what calligraphy ink does when you watercolor over it. Go figure. Didn't know when I first started doing these drawings. Next time I'll probably get a more color fast ink. Excuse me. Fruit fly. But I'm not too bothered by the color bleeds. I can make them work for me instead of against me, which, if you're going to be working with something and it's going to do things that you weren't expecting it to do, it's always good to have the option to make that unexpected thing work for you. Just like always, by the way, since it is a crafting stream, I can see the chat. Feel free to drop questions, maybe even color suggestions for some of the parts. And goal's going to be around an hour today because my roommate that doesn't stream nearly as often as I do will be doing a stream later today, and I do not want to miss that stream. So this fruit fly is driving me nuts. It was not anywhere near me, was not bothering me at all, and then the minute I start streaming, it's like, oh, hey, let's fly around your face. You can see the purple is bleeding a tiny bit into this grayer color, but it gives it almost a shadow appearance, which is a nice touch when we're dealing with a machine that is obviously sat defunct for some time. Given the number of small details, this might actually take me the full hour. It's not going to be the quick and easy like it was with the gnomes, where I could do like 4 in an hour, or however long that stream took. This particular gray is not quite as prominent, I guess would be the phrase, as the previous colors were. You can see it kind of doesn't quite have the same coverage ability. It's more likely to have spots where it's lighter and or darker. Also, this brush is being a pain today, and I don't know why. Worked just fine last week. It was not giving me any of these problems, but okay. But yeah, this was a drawing prompt that I was given just from an online thing. I was looking up drawing prompts for random drawing. Okay, we're going to add some blue here, and the blue is going to be... Is that blue? It certainly looks blue on the palette, but it's looking gray when I put it... Okay, I'm getting some bluish. At least I think it's blue. It might just be the bleeding purple. This is the problem with being colorblind. Or at least somewhat colorblind. I'm not completely colorblind, okay? I'm not somebody who just flat out can't see color at all. But I have trouble distinguishing between different colors. Unless they're like side by side. If you put a navy blue and a black and a dark purple in front of me, I can tell them apart. I can tell you, okay, this one's navy, this one's purple, this one is black. But if you put navy blue in front of me and go, is this the navy blue? Is this blue, purple, or black? I'm going to stare at it for a minute and go, I have no earthly idea. Because I don't. Okay, you're going to see me do the same thing I do when coloring pages, which is turn the page. This is why I really can't work on like large canvases or anything. You can't flip them around like this. If you try, you're just going to get paint all over your hands. As it is, anytime I work calligraphy, I get ink all over my hands, so you know. Well, that didn't turn out too bad. Okay, now I need to find something that will be like... I think I might need to mix colors, but we're gonna... This is either black or purple, and I can't tell which, but we're going to use it as if it were black. Oh good, it looks like it is black. See what I mean? If I don't have them side by side, I can't tell. Not a clue. We're going to leave that instrument panel alone until the rest of this is dried, because I don't want things bleeding over on it. Now we're going to wet down this beigey white, and we're going to do one of the airplanes in it. Frankly, as far as I can tell, it looks like I'm just getting the paper wet and it's going to dry the exact same color it was, but I know that's not the case because I've used this color before and I know it does actually turn beige or cream once it dries. So, doesn't look like much at the moment, but it will. And of course you've got the usual bleed from the ink. Kind of want to go swap out some more firm brushes. This one is very limpid. Is that the right word, limpid? I feel like it is. But, you know, I regularly use words in the wrong context because a lot of them either I've only seen written, that's why I mispronounce a lot of them too. I've only seen them written, I've never heard them said, I've never heard them used outside of whatever literary purpose they were serving. And, you know, if you're reading a lot of things where they use the term limpid, it's generally not modern parlance. So a lot of times it's usage of terms that have faded out of use and become more obscure anyway. And then you have words where the same word can mean its own opposite. Like miffed. Or actually, no. Miffed generally always means upset. It can mean something else, but it generally doesn't. But chuffed. Chuffed can mean both happy and angry or mad, sad. You know, more angry than sad, but still. It's its own antonym. Because English is weird. These things on the plane wing, by the way, are not windows. If you notice, aside from the cockpit, this plane does not have windows. Because it was not a passenger plane. It was a commercial plane. But those are not windows. Those are vents on the wing that help with steering and stuff. I spent a lot of time staring out a plane window back in November, and I noticed those vents and I adored them because, hey, that's a very useful thing that serves a very specific purpose. And so I was fascinated by watching them open and close as needed to provide the plane with, you know, the directions it needed to go. Very cool. I enjoyed it very much seeing that. We're going to go back to our black for the actual turbine. And then our tiny little wheels. I'm always kind of amused by plane wheels because it's such a big, huge machine, and yet the wheels seem so tiny. And I know the reason for that is because the wheels are not, I mean, they're integral for landing, but that's about as integral as they get with a plane. You don't use the wheels for anything aside from landing and moving on the pavement before taking off. So, I mean, technically you can land a plane without using the wheels, but that's very dangerous and not too smart, so, you know. I figure I'm going to go ahead and, since I've got the blue on the brush, might as well get all of the different glass bits covered. Now I don't have to keep swapping colors so much. Okay. So just tilting this so you guys can see a bit better. Now, we want something bright and eye-catching for the junk sign, because of course they want people to notice them, they want people to know this is what we're selling, this is what we've got. So of course they will want everybody to see it, which means anywhere it mixes with the purple is just going to turn to mud instead of being the bright yellow I wanted. But there's only so much I can do with that. We'll just say they used leftover paint that was a bit muddied in color, which happens, you know. Paint does not necessarily retain its freshness for long periods. Plus, you know, time and wear will change a paint's color. It's why, you know, you have to paint the house every several years. Got another blue here, so because I forgot the window. Window is glass. Okay, there's the window painted. Now, we're going to use some of this brown for the building itself. Because, of course, the owners of the junk shop not so interested in the building being pretty as long as it's functional. You know what? I am going to have to swap out paintbrushes because this one is just not doing what I need it to. I'm going to try a little bit more of it. When you've had the chance to use really good quality brushes a time or two, you get a little short-tempered with the ones that aren't. So, at the same time, I kind of like how it makes things look more washed out, almost. I mean, yes, they look washed out. That's kind of one of the things about watercolors, is it makes things look a bit washed out. It's one of the more charming effects, I think is how people would term it. I don't know. It's funny watching it from my perspective. You guys aren't seeing this quite as closely, but anywhere that the calligraphy ink is, your first brush with it almost looks like it's repelling the paint instead of letting it, you know, get to the paper. Do I know why it's doing that? No, not really. For those, by the way, who are keeping score at home, this is week 2 of being able to actually move in. Finally got the washer and dryer ordered. I got to spend the night over there on, well, for me, what counts as Friday night, but it was actually, Friday morning, because I sleep in the morning and get up at 3 p.m. But I slept over there Friday and Saturday, and slept back over here on today, because any day that I will be working later in the day, I want to ensure I sleep over here so that I don't run into, oh, hey, I woke up and the car won't start, or something similar that could prevent me being able to work that night. As it is, I'm going to have to ask my boss if I can schedule time off Tuesday and not come into work, because the washer and dryer have been ordered and they were supposed to be delivered today per the little sign on the purchase thing there at Lowe's, because that's where I got them. But I found out when I was actually paying for them, oh no, we can't deliver until Tuesday. So, okay, well, fine. Just means that I have to sleep over at the new house on Tuesday and get up way early for me, and therefore I will not get enough sleep, because there's no way I'm going to sleep early. My body just doesn't do that. So, that means I'm going to have to take off work, because if I don't get enough sleep, I cannot provide the level of care that is required for my job. Okay, so I want these barrels to look a bit rusty, so we're going to use, well, let's go with the great big one is going to be darker blue. Because if y'all ever seen those big plastic industrial barrels that are blue, we're going to go with one of those. And it's going to be this one here. And then the other two, one of them is just going to be rusted all to hell. So it's going to be nothing but orange, because growing up on a farm, we burned our trash rather than, having a dumpster or a refuse service come get it. And our burn barrels were these old metal oil barrels, and they were completely rusted. Like, the whole thing was nothing but a massive rust. And that's, how I tend to think of things like this, barrels, and so I'm going to go with this smaller one. I want to real quick. And then I'll get plenty of black on my brush, because I want to do the roof all in one go. I don't want to have to re-dip the brush. I'm going to have to do it anyway. brown again. Okay. The building now looks appropriately gross and stained. Alright. So we're going to pick up the same gray that we used for the spaceship, and we're going to do this barrel in it. Which, of course, because of the calligraphy ink, becomes more. Next time I get a mixed media book, I will not be using the calligraphy ink for my drawings. I will be using it for other things, but the actual drawings are going to be done in some ink that is a bit more color fast, so that I don't get as much bleed. Now, we're going to use this darker red for the rust on this barrel. And it's not going to be the whole barrel that's rusted, just little bits and bobs of it. Because rust doesn't normally take over an entire section at once. It just does little bits here and there, and you end up with, eventually, after many, many years of rusting, fairly uniform rust. But up until then, it's just a bit here, a spot there. We're going to do this stack of tires. Say that. So we're going to stop working on the actual vehicles. I want to work on these back walls that are made of compressed junk. So that's where we're going here. Cat hair. Bane of my existence is ladies' fur. Gets everywhere. And it's not a case of we don't groom her, because I do. You know, I even got a specialty de-shedding thing for her and brush her with it fairly regularly, but there's just so much cat hair you can't stop. You know. Also, for anyone with suggestions as to what I should do with all of these painted sketches once I'm done, feel free to let me know. It's not like I could sell them in my Etsy shop. They're a bit too rough and crude for that, but, you know, maybe I can offer them up as giveaways for people who follow the channel. I don't know. Maybe I'll mail them all to my mom and have her stick them on the fridge. Who knows? I honestly can't remember if my mother ever stuck my art on the fridge when I was a kid. Mostly because my mother is very minimalist. And, well, no, she's not minimalist. Her house is full of stuff. But it's all very, very specific. It's all, everything has its place and every place has its thing type situation. And children's art, I believe, instead of ending up on the fridge, went into our baby books, which she then gave us when we were leaving the household finally. So I've still got some of my childhood art. And of course, I've kept a lot of what the twins have done and made. And I am doing the same thing, putting it into, things where it's being kept safe so that when they eventually are older and are heading out into the wild world, I can give them some of those bits. One of the boys really can't stand his art because he's something of a perfectionist, and so I keep catching him trying to throw it away. And if he does once he's, an adult, fine, whatever. It's his art, his choice. But until then, I'm keeping it safe because he might, at some point later in life, want to look back on that art and look and see just how much he's improved, which he is improving. He is honestly very talented. But of course, he thinks that I just say that because, well, you're dad. You have to comment nicely on my art. Which, sort of true. I mean, what parent doesn't, well, most parents will look at their kids' art and be complimentary to it because most parents want to encourage creativity and self-expression in their kids. Are there parents who don't do that? Yeah. But I wouldn't say that they're good parents. And I mean, there are probably some good parents that don't comment on it because, they feel like art is not a viable, marketable skill, which means they're wrong. But, they're doing what they feel is best for the kid. But art is absolutely a viable and marketable skill. It's just you have to really work hard to make it in the art world. And my son, that's not his plan. He doesn't plan to be an artist. But I still want him to have the opportunity to express himself via art. Because art is good. Art is natural. It is a part of the human experience. We have been making art since before we had a word for it. The first humans would grind up white, effectively chalk, but they didn't, of course, know that. It was just a white dirt for them. They would grind it up, and then they would mix it with water and put it in their mouths, and then put their hand on a cave wall and the stuff all over it. So we have now records of these humans where they left their handprints on cave walls, and that is a form of art. It is a form of expression. It's a way of saying, I'm here. I was here. Don't forget me. Humans are meant for creativity. It's what we do. Yes, we're a persistence predator. Yes, we have a lot of other talents and skills. But so much of what humanity is and what humanity was goes back to making, creating, building. It's what we do. It's who we are. One of the first things that kids do, when they're little, is you hand them a crayon and some paper, hopefully paper. They will happily color on things that are not paper if allowed. But you hand them a crayon and you hand them some paper, and they will build you a world. And it might not look the way that the world you see looks, because they're still learning, they're still experimenting. But oh my goodness, can you think of it? We as people, as humans, from our earliest age, want to create. We want to make things. Whether it's building with a block tower, drawing on the wall, frankly. But we want to, because it's what we are, it's what we do. It is how a human, no matter how old or young, makes our mark on the world. We create. That is an excellent color for a bruise if I wanted to do that later. That yellow with purple in it. We're taking shape slowly. I'm going to paint this little car. I just realized that little car has no windshield. So that'd be an interesting one to drive. Maybe it's an electric car from a different planet that has, a navigational computer, so you don't need windows. Who knows? Gonna add some touches of brighter colors into these back walls. Because let's face it, even in junkyards, there is color. It's only in Hollywood where you just see junkyards that are nothing but boring blocks of gray and brown and black. You walk into a junkyard on Earth, and here is a, bright red hunk of a Ford Fiesta, or, all sorts of things like that. Life is not as black and white as movies like to make it out sometimes, and I mean that both in the literal and metaphorical senses. because life is definitely not black and white. Sometimes we wish it were. It'd be easy if all decisions were, this is good, this is bad. But that's not how the world works. Everything has shades of gray. What might work for one person might be the completely wrong solution for another. And so flexibility is very much a key. It's another of the human skills. We're adaptable. Circumstances change, so we change. Or we force those circumstances to comply to what we need them to do. Few more bits of this yellowish color. Sort of a greeny yellow, but it's not quite either. If you had asked me before I figured it out what color it actually is, this color is what I would have referred to as puce. But puce is actually a pink shade, which is very confusing for me because it sounds very much like something that shouldn't be pink. But it is. So. We're going to add some darker blues to that background wall. I also decided against making the background wall uniform squares. Because while, yes, a trash compactor does a very good job of smashing things into uniform squares, there's some things that don't smash that easy. Or as neatly. We're going to use... While we've got it, we're just going to use this darker blue to color on some of the interior components of this one starship. Alright. Starting to think we won't finish this in an hour, but that's okay. We can always come back to it later. I want to do this big spaceship in the back as a gray, but I want it to be a darker gray than the original ones that I was working with. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over it with the gray, and then I'm going to go over it with a very light wash of the black. Because I don't want it to just be the same color as all of the other spaceships, you know? what I thought was gray is looking suspiciously brown on this particular painting part of the picture. There we go. A lot of this is looking very dreary and almost like it's been rained on. Who knows, maybe that's what's going on, is it's raining in this picture and that's why all of the colors are so muddied together and purplish, but I know why it is. It's because the calligraphy isn't getting picked up. But it's okay. Right, we're going to not get a ton of black on here, but we're just going to go over it to darken up that black or that gray into a darker gray, so it's not like the spaceships that all have the very light gray. Still gonna have that purple tone, but now gonna grab some of this color, which you guys can't see it on the palette, but we're gonna use it for some of these accent details. Sorry, I keep going quiet. I'm just focusing on the details on this picture. Now, I did the windows in a lot of these in a blue to look like glass, but on this one, I'm saying that this ship is still semi-powered, and so the windows are going to show lights. So I am hearing messages come in, not from my chat, but from my chat programs, but I'm not looking at them just yet. Okay, I'm going to lightly pick up the black again. We're just going over that. Since we've got so many tires, we're just going to go through and
Only because it was brought out by internet.
color them. There we go.
Even though it's still technically technically made because internet movie nowadays even rips from the movie theaters.
Right.
It's still a good site because it's theirs.
And we're going to go a little bit.
How do you think I watched the? How do you think I watched a couple of movies that were still in theaters? Like Spider-Man. Oh.
Some of these are patches, but some of them are not. So. Sorry, keep having to adjust. Couch still eats people. New bed in new house does not eat people. New bed is very, very firm. You are not gonna sink on it at all, so. And once I get fully moved over there and we have internet over there, that is probably where I'll be streaming from. I'm going to have to figure out what color the ground's going to be here in a bit. Who knows? Maybe it's an alien planet that has a completely unique to it color of ground. Actually, that's a good idea. Okay, let's just experiment a little bit. Lots of people assume that junkyards don't have any greenery in them at all. But that's just not true. Plant life will grow wherever it wants to, including on oil and grass, or on oil and grease stained ground. So. Only places in a junkyard it's not going to grow are the places that get constant foot traffic or vehicle traffic. And even then, it's going to try. If you ever look up like a plane graveyard or places where they put old school buses that are no longer used, that are derelict and defunct, there's greenery. There's a lot of greenery. It's just, lots of what botanists refer to as well, no, I can't remember the term. It basically means plants that take advantage of of areas that have been denuded due to fire or, various other things. And those plants take advantage of it and kind of opportunistically habitat there. And they're actually a very important part of the regrowth process for areas like that, because they soften up soil that's been ruined by constant or by flame, or things, natural disasters of various sorts. They soften that soil up so that other plants can regrow. Most of the plants that do this we refer to as weeds, because we didn't plant them, therefore we don't want them. But the thing is, they're natural. They're what's supposed to be happening. So after a wildfire, you'll see just an explosion of these opportunistic plants that basically clear the way for other native plants to come in after. And then they themselves get crowded out, because most of them are very short plants that, they habitat these areas that have been blasted by fire or other things like that, because there's nothing tall enough to block out the sun. And that's why when the other plants do make their comeback, those plants that we think of as weeds tend to slowly, disappear out of that area. They're still there, though. They're waiting. Their seeds are buried and waiting for a time when there's less plants again that can block the sun. And that's why they're so important, though, for rewilding projects. Like right now, there's a project going on in Europe that is trying to reintroduce the European bison. And there are some people that are kind of, oh, this is pointless, there's no real space for them, yada, yada, yada. The thing is, even if we only have them on certain small set areas, that doesn't mean that it's a failure, because what they're there for is not to, repopulate the entirety of various countries with European bison. They're there to help prepare the soil for native plants. Because, don't know about y'all, but lots of plants like poop. And they like herbivore poop. And cattle are great, but they don't necessarily, unless it's wild cattle that are native to an area, don't necessarily provide in their poop what the native plants need. So that's why they're attempting to cat hair in my painting. That's why they're attempting to bring back these European bison in small set areas, to rewild the area, to bring back other native flora and fauna. And I think it's great. I think we should be doing things like this as much as possible, when possible, where possible. But there are always going to be naysayers no matter what you do, so So what I'm doing here is I am putting in these either native soil or native grass, who knows. Probably native grass, because I'm then planning to do a trail in a different color. So it's going to be what is effectively what we call a desire trail. And for those who are not familiar with that term, it's what happens when I'm sure we've all seen a place where they put in a sidewalk and people just ignored this ignored the sidewalk and walked where they wanted to, and it formed a path where the grass has been trampled down, etc. Those are actually useful to landscapers and stuff because they tell them where the actual foot traffic is and therefore where the actual sidewalks should be. One of the stores near where I live currently, they discovered that a desire trail or a desire path had formed in a completely different place than where they had anticipated it. So they then went and removed the old sidewalk and instead put the sidewalk where the desire trail was. And now people use it and therefore use the sidewalk rather than tromping on all the grass. That said, I'd rather they didn't have grass and they used like native plants instead, but you know, you can only get so much out of landscapers, and most landscapers do not like using native plants unless you are in a place that xeriscapes, because of it being a desert environment, in which case, yes, all the native plants, because they don't need as much water and they don't contribute to the further drought in those areas. So in places that need it, I am a huge fan of xeriscaping. It is much better to, as much as possible, use native plants in your landscaping. And if you live in a desert area, that means xeriscaping, which is lots of succulents that don't need a ton of water, or as most of mine do, they do fine on very little water, but when you do need to water them, you give them a lot of water all at once, because that's what would happen with them in the wild. A lot of them come from regions where, you know, it doesn't rain often, but when it does, it rains and rains and rains. And you end up with very, very wet soil for a very short time in the year. And the plants that are from that region, they learn to take advantage of that short period with lots and lots of rain. They soak up and store that water, and they use it slowly over the rest of the dry seasons. Which is why my cactus get watered every 2 weeks, if I remember. And sometimes they go a lot longer than that without it. Air plants are also lovely in that regard because they can go a very long time without water, and then they perk right back up when you do water them again. I very much appreciate plants that do that. Makes my life easier. Okay, so we're going to do this deep red for our desire trail. And it's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be necessarily straight, because humanity does not walk in perfectly straight lines. Adjusting again. Alright, so I'm going to need to end here in the next 5-ish minutes. I'm not going to finish, but my roommate is planning to stream, and I absolutely do not want to miss his streams. So if you want to check them out, his is Scipio's something or other. I can't remember off the top of my head, but feel free to drop in with him after my stream. Gonna add a few little more bits of coloring while I can. Haven't decided yet if I'm going to wait on finishing this and do this on next week's crafting stream, or if I'm going to just work on it during the week. There's not much left to go, so I might work on it during the week. I might not. We'll just see. Because I do have some other pieces that I want to paint for you guys to see. Because I've done some drawings that are honestly I'm pretty proud of, and I'd like to show those off as part of painting them, but we'll just have to see how it goes. I'm going to do let's do one last hunk of bright orange for this big piece. So, just a few minutes more. There we go. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and call the stream here. I do want to thank everyone who came out to join me tonight for this watercolor. I hope you guys had fun watching. I hope that you're enjoying the, hope you're enjoying the picture as it is turning out. But I hope that you guys all I hope that you guys take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you guys next week on Saturday for my gaming stream. And I am pretty sure that next week it is going to be Guild Wars 2. So, again, be safe out there, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you next week.